All right, welcome back to the Race to World First daily recap. Today we have Instant Dollars taking down 4 Mythic bosses. Will the raids enter Mythic at any point soon from the top 3 guilds? And is there anything to be done about the problems of split rating? I'm Dratnos, joined by Tettles. What up?
Is this going to be the consistent intro that you and I are
No,
going
I
for
don't know.
from here on out?
It seemed like you had fun yesterday with it, so I wanted to do it too.
How was it? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it's a good intro. I liked it.
Okay. So yeah, basically everything that Drano said holds pretty true. Instant Dollars got into Mythic pretty early last night and were able to down a few bosses. It looks like Honolulu has matched them. Instant Dollars one-shot Gnarlroot, one-shot Volcaros, and then it took about 3 to 4 pulls on both Agira and Council. And so
Interesting. Yeah, Volcaros is one that getting one shot I think is
I was
it
surprised.
can't be that bad if it's one shotable by. I mean, ID is really good, but the fact that that boss is able to get one shot, that means it's definitely not going to be one of those like at all sizable wall bosses for many guilds. Like, you know, Rashok, for instance, was in a
Yeah.
similar spot in the raid and was not one shot by anybody, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of talking to some friends, and there was some speculation that there might not be any walls in Mythic until we see like up to until Smolderon. Where, I mean, in reality, if there's a wall in Mythic, you want it to probably be Smolderon. All things considered, that is one of the fights that you want to be hard because was that fight 7?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's expecting Farok to be hard, right? Tindril, the second to last boss. Usually,
Yes.
second to last bosses are pretty hard.
Yeah.
And then Smolderon is in that Sludge Fist spot that could be quite hard. And then the question marks are like Laradar and Naimu or Nimue or whatever.
Whatever that boss is. Yeah.
I think it's supposed to be Nimue, but I don't know. I'm gonna keep changing my pronunciation every time I say it. That boss, those bosses are like the wing end bosses, Laradar and Nimue. I think are the next question marks. Like, are those hard? And by the time this video comes out, probably Instant Dollars will be starting to pull them for the day, and I wouldn't be surprised if one or both of them fall to that guild by the end of the day. But if they don't, then that might mean, oh, okay, these bosses will actually be 20 to 50 pulls even in the Race to World First.
Yeah, I mean, ID was in, but they were just doing like Mythic Plus last time I saw. For Liquid today, Liquid just had a few splits to actually finish up. They were really close to being done last I was checking, and then they were like breaking for Mythic Plus splits. This is not super surprising.
I'm not surprised M plus is an important thing to do. Echo, on the other hand, they've just ended their second day. I think they still have like it's between 2 and 4 total heroic splits, which of course they run them 2 at a time. So between 1 and 2 more like hours of heroic probably that they'll have to do. And then they've got all their heroic Faroks that they have to do. And then it'll probably be either M plus or into Mythic. I think M plus is pretty likely for them as well.
Yeah. I mean, Max tweeted out earlier, I mean, just in the concept of splits, I think that, like, by the time that this video is being recorded, like, after dinner, I think that there's a chance that Liquid goes into Mythic at some point. Like, I think it is a possibility. I mean, if you look at this tweet, Max is alluding to the fact that Mythic is on the table for today. I'm interested to see, like, are they going to be able to get into Mythic today? Because, like, there is so much Mythic Plus that you can be looking to do.
Yeah, it's interesting as well because, in Liquid's position...
they're close, right?
Yeah, it's just like, if you jump into Mythic, how far do you want to get at Mythic? I guess you can do those first 4 bosses now that Instant Dollars has done them, but, if you spend a lot of time bashing your head against Mythic, and then Echo maybe get in a position where they can just do M plus for a while, get into Mythic even later, but with like 3 extra item levels, and then just, smash through the path that you've trailblazed already, that could be potentially... Like, I feel like the incentives are maybe for Liquid to do more M plus than Echo, or to spend a little bit more time in it potentially. So we'll see how that ends up actually turning out. Though I know that guild. I mean, everybody just wants to get into Mythic, right? Everybody wants to kill Mythic bosses. That's why they got into the Race to World First to begin with.
I think it was maybe a bit preemptive also to talk about like difficulties and splits yesterday. It seemed like both of the guilds ended up having about the same level of problems.
Smolderon and Tindril were the main guild. They were cutting players in some but not all of their splits from the raids to be able to kill those bosses.
Helper runs are so hard.
Yeah, like especially Smolderon in particular. That boss gets a 5% damage amp for each orb that gets unsoaked, and each player spawns 5 of them. So if you have a couple of helpers that are missing an orb or 2 each cast, that boss is doing 50% more damage by the end of the fight. Like, that is not doable. So both guilds did have to cut down on players to some extent so that they would be able to actually get through those bosses, depending on the split, depending on the quality of the people in any given split.
Yeah. Final thing on the docket for today. I mean, the early days are a bit slow. Things are really going to start probably picking up pace within the next 24 to 48 hours. But the last thing we have to talk about are splits healthy for the Race to World First? And there's been a very interesting tweet by Roger Brown talking about the fact that he's so over splits being a thing for the War Within. His goal is to convince Blizzard to kill this for good. It's his life goal at this point. Does Blizzard ever kill splits, or is this like a thing that the guilds are going to kind of have to come to an agreement on?
Yeah, so splits are an interesting thing because nobody likes splits, right?
Nobody likes splits.
None of the viewers like splits, but splits come about because of the arms race between the guilds, right? Where it's like, hey, we get more world ranks if we get better gear and we kill the bosses sooner. Splits are the best way to gear up. And so to remove splits, I mean, you could have some kind of agreement between the guilds. That's often talked about as a solution for both splits and for global release and all these different problems. But I always feel like it's pretty naive to expect the guilds to just unilaterally disarm on these different kinds of ideas.
I mean, because then at that point,
it's so hard to enforce as well. Like, and at that point as well, like, people that want to just be killing the bosses in 2 weeks rather than 5 will just go to Instant Dollars or whatever guild isn't part of this agreement at the top, and that guild will be the new World First guild. And it's I don't think it's a realistic path forward is like an agreement to not do splits.
I agree.
I think that something would have to come from Blizzard. Now, if it was as much as Blizzard just saying like, hey, we're only going to officially recognize, like, we're going to start keeping track of official World First, and one of the criteria is that you don't do splits, and here's our definition for splits, and if you do this, you're not going to qualify for World First or whatever. Like, that might be enough, but it would have to come from them, I think, not from just like a agreement between Max and Stripe or whatever.
I actually think that would be kind of interesting from like a Blizzard perspective. I don't think I would expect them to do anything either. I guess just like at a glance, I feel like Blizzard is typically pretty hands off the Race to World First. They do involve themselves in some capacities, and the ways that they involve themselves is, they release drops. They release Twitch drops whenever the Race to World First is going on because they know people are going to be watching the Race to World First, and they know it's good coverage for them. And they do stuff like that. I think there's like a Warcraft Rumble sponsorship that you guys have as well.
Actually, I think all 3 orgs have a Warcraft Rumble sponsorship this time around, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So I mean, there's stuff like Blizzard does stuff like that. They don't like and then they I think there's also like a private Discord channel where there's like bugs reported for bosses and stuff like that, and patch
notes. It used to exist, but there is now more like direct dev involvement with making sure that the race is being like they're doing a good job of identifying and fixing bugs quickly, and also communicating with the players about what sorts of strategies will be considered exploits and which ones won't. Which is always good to remove the ambiguity around those sorts of things. But
I agree.
I don't know. I mean, like, Ritual First is like the biggest thing on Twitch when it's rolling. I do think it makes some sense for Blizzard to look at if they look at it and they're like, man, it does kind of suck that this is being held back to some extent by the fact that the first 2 or 3 days are full of the most boring content of the race, right?
I agree.
And we don't start with a bang. But I don't think they would solve it with like some kind of agreement. I think they would solve it through systems, right? They would solve it through some kind of designing a system whereby splits weren't encouraged. The problem is it's very hard to do that. I'm sure there will be a lot of great comments down below that offer one of the many different suggestions that all have various different fatal flaws in how they wouldn't actually remove splits or make splits better, which is always fun. Anytime I talk about this on stream or whatever, you start reading Twitch chat and just people are suggesting things, and you look at them and you're like, okay, well, here's how you'd optimize that one, and it's 10 times worse than splits.
Dude, I love the make it account bound lockout, as if these people are going to buy as if these people are going to buy new licenses and stuff like that. Like
like a lot of them already have all their characters on different accounts anyways, because then they can be logged in and do the campaign on all of them simultaneously.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, do you think that maybe Blizzard would sanction something down?
I think that for Blizzard, and rightly so, the priority is like, hey, we don't want to just change our loot system that is working for 99% of players.
It works. It works for everybody, or not for everybody.
It's a great loot system, right?
Yeah.
But like, we don't want to solve this problem of splits primarily in the Race to World First, and to some extent in like other random Hall of Fame guilds that are doing much fewer, but still doing some splits, and most of which would prefer not to be doing. Like, I'm in a guild that does 2 runs, and we would prefer to do 1, right? We'd be happier there, but we prefer the gear more than we'd prefer not to do splits, right?
God, I hate splits. Splits are so unfun, man. Like, okay,
it's rough.
Playing an alt is fine. Doing splits, like funneling gear off of a character onto another character, is just like a miserable experience.
Yeah, playing a character you're less familiar with and less geared on, and not getting any gear on it, definitely can be a nasty place to be. But yeah, so that like I think Blizzard's priority is like we don't want to do anything that would hurt every other player. But if there was some way to, fix splits without impacting or hurting, and in fact, there are often changes that actually help everybody that are first thought of in the context of high level play, right? That does happen fairly often. I think you can even look at this upgrade system as something that may have been done in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think they would be happy to do that. Like, I think they also would rather get rid of it if they could easily. Like, if they could just push a button that deleted splits, they would. Just the problem is that button doesn't exist. And maybe Roger's, like, if Roger's been cooking for the last 3 months, maybe he's got something ready to go that actually does have the benefits of removing splits without other drawbacks, which would be fantastic.
I mean, the Race to World First is a content-focused event. Like, all of the organizations, all of the money that's being poured in the Race to World First, everybody wants it to be the best viewer experience possible. And being like, oh yeah, these guilds don't want it to be a good viewer experience, that's just demonstrably false. Literally, the guilds care about getting the Race to World First, but they also want it to be a good viewer experience for the people at home. And so, if it's possible to do that with things like removal of splits, that would be good, because I think that it really kind of takes the air out of the room a little bit in regards to the first couple of days of the patch. It's just not worth watching in a weird way.
Yeah. It's funny because we always complain about it during splits, but then by the end of the race, splits were so long ago that we've kind of forgotten, and we were just like, yeah, that was sweet, right? Because it's the end of a bunch of Mythic prog. So it feels bad now, but in a couple days, once they're into Mythic, I'm sure it won't feel as bad anymore.
I mean, I think we're into Mythic soon. Maybe the early boss is a Mythic at least. I mean, I actually think that Max is probably right. I think that they're likely into Mythic, at least in the near future.
By the time this video is out, perhaps a possibility.
I mean, I'm looking
at
Echo
right are now hoping to enter Mythic within the next 24 hours as well, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they're still in Mythic Plus. I could see them.
Plus really good.
Yeah, I could see them downing the first couple of Mythic bosses, and then being like, we do a couple more Mythic Plus, and maybe we show back up at the Mythic tomorrow.
Yeah, I do think Mythic prog will be starting soon, TM, but that's always the worst phase of splits, is when it's been going on for so long that you think it's almost over, and then they just break out another few splits that they need to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got unlimited characters this tier, I feel like.
Absolutely, yeah, more than ever, because of the extra item level jump and the fact that Heroic is expected to be harder than before and be able to support fewer helpers, which it certainly had. The helper ratio has gone down from Avarice, but they were still able to get helpers through a lot of these later bosses, which is really good.
Yeah, it's good for all the guilds. I'm interested in seeing, it's very difficult to tell, during the Race to World First, exactly how the splits and the helpers are going on without, actually talking to the guilds. I would be interested in talking to the guilds, after the fact, and seeing, how they felt their splits went, if there's anything that they think about optimizing, because there are about 40 people in the world or about 80 people in the world that know how their splits are going, and it happens to be the 40 people on both of these two teams that we're talking about primarily.
Yeah, it's always a pretty hard thing to judge from the outside, although you can tell, when they start wiping, that's probably not what they wanted to do.
All right. Anyways, any final thoughts for today?
Nope. Head empty.
All right. Surely we see Mythic tomorrow. Max will never let us down with this great American flag in the rain picture.
God bless.
And God bless the USA. Goodbye.